You're listening to Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right, well, hello, everybody. Welcome to another Monday night talking Star Wars with you guys. I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
And we're your hosts for this wonderful show that we're doing on Monday night. And this time, this is something that I had thought about ever since, it's something that I thought about ever since the Darth Vader comic that Black Krrsantan was introduced in. But definitely once you saw him in live action in the Book of Boba Fett, I started thinking, who is stronger, Chewbacca or Black Krrsantan? And then, of course, the interesting thing is there's a comic coming out in June. It's Han Solo and Chewbacca issue number 4, because this is like a new series that they're doing. In fact, I read issue number 1 last night. So far, it's looking like it's going to be a 4-part series. They said the same thing about the High Republic, and it went on for a little while. But apparently, they're going to answer this question for us. I guess there's going to be a definitive thing that Han Solo's in trouble, and then when you, I probably should have actually snagged a picture of the actual comic cover, because it basically, yeah, because it shows like Black Krrsantan almost like surprising Han and Chewie. So I don't know. So it was an interesting thing, and I think that, like you said, on Mondays, we always like to have more of a fun, discussion thing. This actually kind of harkens back to our old Duel of the Fate segment.
Exactly.
I almost dusted off that whole intro and, kind of put it in there. It was just like,
Right.
I mean, I thought about it. I have to admit, I thought about it, but yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting that they're addressing this. And one of the things that I think is also really cool about this, actually, is they're starting to include Black Krrsantan in more and more things. I mean, first, he was introduced back in the Darth Vader comic in 2015, I think. And, after that, it was kind of like he would pop up here and there, but I wouldn't really consider him somebody that was major. But, now he's coming up in the Book of Boba Fett, and everybody's drawn to him a little bit, which, as I feel I should point out, it's almost like a badge of honor at this point, where he was in my top 5 or 10 or whatever bounty hunters. If you go back and watch our show where we did I really do need to look at that and see, because I can't remember if we did top 5 or top 10. I want to say it's top 10.
10, yeah.
I'm pretty sure that we did a top 10. Because I remember we were both kind of like, no. Do we even have are there even, do we even know 10? I mean, it was kind of funny. And, but Black Krrsantan was always one that really appealed to me, just because his characterization in the comics, the fact that he had worked with Boba Fett before, I really thought that it was kind of cool. So it actually makes sense that they would pit these two up against each other somehow. So I guess, today we'll probably just maybe go over our thoughts on, because obviously this comic's not coming out until June, and when it does come out, we'll naturally readdress this or mention it or something. But, we can talk a little bit about the comic. We can talk about who we think would actually win in a battle, and under what circumstances too, because even if this comic reveals, let's just say for the sake of argument, it reveals that Black Krrsantan is more powerful, well, maybe that's in whatever circumstance it is, It was almost like when we were addressing the whole idea that, how can Finn face Kylo Ren in any kind of a battle? I mean, it was almost ridiculous, but as we pointed out, he basically had this mortal wound from Chewie's bowcaster, and that weakened him enough that it allowed Finn to actually have somewhat of the upper hand. So we really don't know under what circumstances that Chewbacca and Black Krrsantan are actually going to face off. And so we don't really know what circumstances that a victor will be named. So we just have to, we'll just have to wait and see on that one. But naturally, it's ripe for speculation. So, we're going to do it. Anybody chatting live, definitely let us know who you think would win in a battle. And of course, in the comment section too. Watching the rebroadcast, or maybe you just don't want to chat in, but you're watching it live. Hey, feel free to put this thing in the comment section. And while you're there, definitely hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, because it all really helps the channel grow. Every YouTuber in the world probably tells you that now, but it's true. All right, so with this whole thing, well, I guess first, who do you think would win? I guess we can go there first, and then I'll talk a little bit about the actual comic. So the comic's pretty cool.
Well, I mean, once again, it's kind of hard because, you bring up a very valid point. You have to consider the circumstance. Is one injured, one not, so on and so forth. Does anyone have a particular advantage in, one thing or another? So looking at these two, there's just the general nature of a Wookiee. You know what I mean? Like there's some traits that all Wookiees generally have. And of course, they have great height, and they're great strength. They're all known for pretty much being able to pull arms out of people's sockets, as Han so eloquently informed us. And we actually got a chance to see that, which was actually cool in the Book of Boba Fett, where Krrsantan actually did that to someone, which I thought that was a nice nod.
Well, and before that, it's funny because in the article that we sourced this from, it was talking about how, Chewbacca was almost like you could tell he was fearsome, but they were definitely alluding to stuff like that. And what I thought was really cool was in the deleted scene of The Force Awakens, Chewbacca does rip the arms off of Unkar Platt, actually. So
yeah,
there is that too. I mean, I don't know. Obviously, we could probably actually do an entire show on whether deleted scenes and things like that are actually canon. I don't. It's they would probably say no, only because of the same reason why.
they didn't make it into the movie.
Well, it's like, because if you remember, there's a lot of plot points that happen in the Force Awakens novelization. Most notably that Poe and Rey actually met in the Force Awakens versus in the Last Jedi, which we see depicted in the films, and obviously that happens because the authors need something. They need a script or something to go on in order to make the novelization. And obviously during the movie making process, you just, you have changes. That's just the way it goes. And so the rule of thumb is always that the films take precedence. So if you have some sort of contradiction in canon, then you have to default to the film. However, with the deleted scene thing, that's a little bit of a stickier point because, I mean, the whole Biggs Darklighter thing and all that stuff that was deleted from A New Hope is largely considered canon. So, that could probably actually be the subject of another show. But needless to say, yes, they have shown and demonstrated the fearsomeness of Wookiees and everything else.
Yeah. So the other thing about a Wookiee is that when they get angry, which they often do, they're tempered much like the Incredible Hulk. Of course, like makes them stronger, and they become more ferocious, more vicious. The angrier they get. So I think that also plays a part in, because like who has a greater, I guess, anger threshold, if you will, or ceiling. So there's that. But I want to say, like, on one hand, Krrsantan, he's actually trained. Like, he's a bounty hunter. He's been trained in a lot of different things. He was actually kind of used as a circus performer, so it was alluded to us in the Book of Boba Fett. He looks, I mean, his just sheer size, like he's wider than Chewbacca, it seems. Like it's more broad, more muscular in that regard. Um, I know a lot of Wookiees tend to eat, like, a lot of calories because they're big creatures. So, but because of Krrsantan, what he's doing, he's a bounty hunter. He's running around. He's chasing and hunting people down. You would think that maybe he's going to need more fuel for his body to do that particular job. Whereas Chewie, he's kind of the co-pilot with Han. I mean, granted, he's running around doing stuff, but it's not quite to the same. I don't think.
Well, let's not forget about his background in the Wookiee Army Rangers.
I was getting to that. So, yes, Chewbacca does have that honorable distinction, if you will. So there's that. But I think I will pick, honestly, Chewbacca. Honestly, I will pick Chewbacca only because I think in a lot of ways he may be more cerebral or intelligent. And I think because also he's hung out with Han a lot, and he's probably picked up a lot of little just tricks in being able to be a little slick with some things that might come in, as an advantage in a fight versus Krrsantan's just pure brute strength. I mean, Krrsantan may be stronger, and that's what the title says. So I think Krrsantan is actually stronger, but I think if these two actually went head to head, I think Chewie would probably find more of a creative way to actually win.
Yeah, that's kind of tough because on one hand, there's a lot of stuff that people just forget about because it's not the focal point of the beloved original trilogy. But, Chewbacca has quite a extensive military background, I might add. Besides which, with the size thing, I don't really look at that too much because it's like saying that, somebody like Schwarzenegger or something could beat Bruce Lee. Yeah, that ain't happening. So, Bruce Lee's smaller. I mean, who cares? It's really all about fighting and stuff like that. Whereas Krrsantan is more of a gladiator. He's more of an arena fighter. Chewbacca was actually a trained soldier. And, he's been in numerous different skirmishes and everything like that. So I would probably, and then of course, factoring into what you said, because I didn't even really think of all that stuff either, is the fact that, he's probably a more cunning fighter. He's probably more strategic. And I think that, obviously he's a better fighter. But that is a good point, though. I mean, I guess that's really implied in the whole thing. But yeah, I mean, if you're really looking at our title and it's like who's stronger, I mean, you would automatically, I think, give the edge to Krrsantan at first glance, simply because of just his sheer bulk and size and some of the stuff we've seen. The other thing that we can point to is, if you're going to keep this conversation more or less in universe, is that you also have to look at the fact that, Krrsantan, look at all that, just that barrage of fire and stuff that he took in the season finale of the Book of Boba Fett. I don't know if Chewbacca could have handled all that. I don't know. So right. I mean, there's an endurance thing, but I mean, do we get hung up on that? Do we sit there and say, well, the title of the show isn't who has the most endurance? I mean, I think when we're talking about stronger, we're not limiting it to just the strength or anything like that. I mean, I think it becomes, everything in totality: the endurance, the skill, the fighting abilities, the whole thing.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, and I think, I don't know who would have. I mean, I guess it would probably depend on the day or the situation as far as the anger thing, because Chewbacca can get pretty irritated, but so can Krrsantan. So once again, those things kind of have to kind of edge out. I mean, I think it would be a good battle. I don't think it would be just it's not like Krrsantan would like wipe the floor with Chewie or anything like that. I don't think it's anything to that degree. And it's funny because when I first saw Krrsantan, I thought it was Tarfal.
Yeah, it's so funny, man, that you bring that up, because I was actually going to say at the beginning of the show, yeah, they do. And I was going to say that it would almost be more of a apples to apples type of comparison if you did Tarfal versus Krrsantan, because there's a really similar thing going, and it almost makes me wonder if when they created Krrsantan, if he wasn't based a little bit on Tarfal, because that's really who, when you think about it, because really I think he was in the whole Battle of Kashyyyk or whatever, at least as far as the films are concerned, I think he's the only other actual named Wookiee, so I think they actually named him. I mean, I know there's that whole famous, goodbye Tarfal, goodbye Chewbacca, that whole thing. But he might have been named, somewhere else. But yeah, Tarfal is the one that.
Well, yeah, he's also the leader of the Wookiees too. He's
exactly
not just,
right. And so that you can actually see that more as a, like an apples to apples comparison. But when you keep bringing up the whole thing about how it depends on, the situation and things like that, I think that centric to this whole comic that's coming out, which again, it's going to be issue number 4. So the way that it's shaking down is issue number 1 of Han Solo and Chewbacca is out now. 2, I think, is coming out probably in a few weeks. It's sometime in April. I think 3 is in May, and then 4 is in June. So I don't know, I was almost tempted because when I was looking at that going, man, we're about to, I mean, after all, we do say on this thing that, comic book reveals, who's stronger. The only thing that we neglected to put on there is the fact that the comic's not out yet. So,
right.
Hopefully it doesn't mislead anybody. But I mean, the whole idea behind this was, it was a cool thing to actually debate now, because honestly, once the comic is out, well, then you're just debating on whether or not you agree with their choice and the circumstance or not. But what's cool about this is that it basically is sparking the whole conversation. It's like, well, yeah, that's a good point. I mean, who would win in a fight between these two guys? And going to your point, where you're talking about the whole, it just depends on the circumstance. Apparently in this comic, what they're doing is, they keep mentioning that Han's in trouble, and that's why Chewie has to more or less come to his rescue, and he has to somehow Krrsantan gets in the way of all this. And so if he's motivated by that, especially the whole life debt thing, I mean, it's not even just the fact that Han's his friend at this point, but, there is that whole life debt deal. So, I think that there's going to be a lot more motivation on Chewbacca's part to pretty much overcome any obstacle, including Krrsantan. So, there's that.
Yeah, now you read the book Life Debt too, didn't you?
Yeah. Well, yeah, and that's true. That's actually the second book of the Aftermath trilogy. Although it's interesting because that book sort of went on a detour. You had this whole establishing thing and Aftermath and all that stuff where, they're talking about the whole military part, and they had a bunch of characters that they had introduced and some that they carried over, like Ray Sloan and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden, when Life Debt comes out, it is a continuation of the story. But what's really fascinating to me about it is it sort of goes off on this weird, it's almost like they're retelling the story of Han and Chewie in a way, but in a more canonized fashion. I think that actually came out, though, before Solo. Whereas Solo depicts the actual beginnings. Okay, here's how Han and Chewie met. Here's how the whole Life Debt thing, went into play. The Life Debt novel actually puts us in okay, this is where we're at with it after Return of the Jedi, and this is what's going on, and this is why Chewie's still motivated. And it kind of flashes back. I don't think there was anything that actually contradicted anything that happened in Solo, but, it is really interesting, though. So, yeah, I did read that, and that was a really good book, because Aftermath, the first book in the trilogy, was a little, hey, Ronaldo joins us. Hey, Ronaldo.
Hey, Ronaldo.
The Aftermath book was, it was good, but it was a little, just the way it was written, I think, it was a little difficult to get through. But Life Debt Life Debt, and then of course the third book, Empire's End, were incredible. I mean, it's almost worth it. You know, I mean, not everybody had a problem with Aftermath, but I would say probably like 70-80% of the people were like, yeah, you know, it's a little tough to get through. But the characters are great, and you know, it's just I can't really explain why it was tough to get through, because it's not like the story was bad and the characters were incredible. It's just, I don't know, it's just the way it was written. But yeah, it was really good. And what's interesting when you bring that up is the fact that this new comic series, this Han Solo and Chewbacca thing, you know, because I decided to actually go ahead and read that since we were actually talking about issue number 4. And I've been reading the comics, you know. I mean, when something comes up that's interesting, because I already subscribed to a bunch of them. And not every Star Wars comic is ongoing. You know, a lot of them are just like kind of a limited series thing, and that's what this is. It's supposed to be like a 4-issue thing, and you know, it's going to end with the comic actually that we're talking about. But I figure, you know what? I better read that too, and you know, that's where I think that it actually works out a little bit. Let me just get to this one thing, because Ronaldo makes a good point, and I need to do this. He says the first book works better as an audiobook. See, I could see that. I could see that being the case, because, like I said, there was nothing wrong with the story. There's nothing wrong with the characters. It's just, there was something about the way it reads. I guess that's the best way to put it. And really, the Aftermath trilogy would probably be a good way to get into the audiobook thing, because that's the one thing that I've never done. I've never listened to, I won't say I've never listened to any audiobooks, but I've never actually listened to a Star Wars one. And, you know, the cool thing about those is that, I mean, they got the music and sound effects, and, you know, it's really like listening to a radio drama from the, you know, 30s or 40s or something. So I have always wanted to do that, you know, and actually the Aftermath, and I would say that to anybody that's watching this too, is that if you haven't read the Aftermath trilogy, audiobook might be the way to go on that. Audiobook might be the way to go.
Hey, Ronaldo, who do you think will win? Just throwing it out there to you. Black Krrsantan or Chewbacca? Who do you think is stronger?
Yeah, that's true. We should, you know, reiterate that. But, and while he's chatting that in, let me get a little background on this comic. So this comic, this Han Solo and Chewbacca thing, I was actually going to skip it. I thought about maybe not necessarily doing it. But then, of course, when we were going to talk about this, it's like, well, I mean, I almost feel obligated. Like one of us should be reading, you know, this thing at least to get a feel for it. And especially if we're going to have any kind of intelligent discussion on it, we need to do it. And what's cool is that it's actually really good. You know, it's not just like your typical spin-off thing where it just focuses on a couple characters and they're going on some nothing mission or whatever. I mean, it's actually a really, really cool thing. And it basically takes place before Solo joined before he joined the rebellion, even.
Okay.
So he's still in his smuggling days working with Jabba, which is really cool, because you're actually seeing kind of the more seedy side of Solo at this point. And
well, not only that, but that's kind of cool too, because you got Black Krrsantan, who's often hired by Jabba and Vader, and then you got, you know, Han and Chewie running around as smugglers, so they're on the same side of the law, so to speak, in a way. Well, kind of, but
well, yeah, I mean, pretty much. I mean, the smugglers and the bounty hunters are pretty much more or less on the same. They just have slightly different interests. You know, smugglers are actually taking some sort of a product or something or person and, you know, delivering them to somebody else, right? They're almost, you know, they're Amazon, whereas the bounty hunters are, you know, more like the lawmen or something, you know, or enforcers, I should say. So, yeah. So, okay. So, Ronaldo says, I think Black Krrsantan is stronger and he would win. Oh, you should really go back and watch the beginning of our show. And then he goes on to say, didn't they fight in the comics? No, I don't think they ended up fighting in the Vader comics. And I don't think that they fought in the War of the Bounty Hunters thing. In fact, pretty much the whole reason why we're doing this show is because they are apparently going to fight in issue number 4 of this Han Solo and Chewbacca comic, of which they released the first issue. So the first issue's out, and it's really cool. You know, Han basically ends up taking this job where he has to go back to Corellia, you know, and it's funny because, you know, when they get there and everything, he's kind of like a little skittish that he would have to see, what's her name? The worm chick from that was on Corellia. Lady
Yeah, I
something,
remember her
right?
name.
Yeah. But, you know, he's kind of like, you know, which
Hey.
is cool because I think that it's really, Praxima, something like that. I think it's like
Lady Proxima.
Yeah, or something like that. But yeah, it's really funny too because I like the continuity, and that's one of the things that I think is really, really cool about the way that they do these things, is that they maintain the continuity from other book sources, from other comics, from the films. You know, it's not just like these encapsulated stories that seemingly ignore the other parts of the franchise, at least the other media. And that was one of the things that always drove me nuts about the way things were before, is the fact that when you had the old EU, there were a lot of things that were pretty much included in the EU, right? So the EU would pretty much keep continuity within itself. But obviously, because of the way the Lucas felt about it, you know, the films might borrow from him occasionally, but sometimes he would change the whole thing. So it would nullify the continuity. And it wouldn't always follow the same continuity as some of the other comic series, because they were under the umbrella of different companies. So what I really like is the fact that now everything is following a singular continuity line. Now, sometimes, yes, they do paint themselves into a corner, or they, I don't know, if the story group just, you know, overslept that day or what. You know, it's almost like they neglect something. But I like the fact that they're doing it. Ronaldo says, so basically it's a good comic. I haven't read it just because I don't think we need to revisit Han and Chewie. See, that's exactly what I thought too. And in fact, that was my exact reasoning for not doing it. Because, you know, even though these comics are only like $3 or $4 an issue, they add up if you start to subscribe to a bunch of them. You know, I mean, and for me, I'm always subscribing to the main Star Wars line. If there's a Vader comic, I got that going. I had the War of the Bounty Hunter, that ended. Now Crimson Reign is popping up. You know, so there's like a handful of these and the High Republic series too. Now there's a second High Republic comic series that I have yet to subscribe to. But yeah, I mean, it's surprisingly really good. Like I said, the first issue is out now. It's going to be a really limited thing, so it's not going to break the bank. You know, it's going to be, I don't know, somewhere between $12 and $15 for the entire thing. You know, the entire run. Because it's basically like $4 something an issue. But yeah, it's got a really good story. It's well illustrated. It's very well written. And it's compelling. It's really compelling. And like I said, the only reason that I started to read it was because since we're talking about issue number 4, which of course is going to come out in June, I felt like, okay, at least one of us should, you know, because there's nothing more annoying, and I've seen this on other channels too, where it's like these people have, you know, they start talking about something, and it's obvious they have no idea. Like, they've never read the source thing. it's really more like what they're doing is they're commenting on other things. Now, granted, because this comic isn't out yet, or I should say this issue isn't out yet, and really the whole reason why we're doing this is just as kind of like a, hey, this is a cool discussion topic. I mean, it's not really directly related to the issue's release. It's just that, obviously, this issue, when it comes out in June, is going to present a situation or a circumstance in which one of these two guys emerges as a victor. So it would be kind of fun before that happens for us to all get together and discuss it and, see what we think about the whole thing. But that said, I was just like, I'm kind of curious. So I bit the bullet and got the comic, and I got to say, I'm really glad I did. Yeah, I highly recommend this series. And like I said, it's not, if you do decide to do it, it's not like, you're signing up for some endless, thing or whatever. I mean, it's not even, because a lot of these limited series are like maybe somewhere between like 6 to 10 issues. This one's only 4, so this is a good, one and done kind of thing. And it's the other thing that I like about it, and this is one of the reasons why I really started to go to a lot of the comics lately, is because they're doing a lot of canon-based stuff. Like, especially where the War of the Bounty Hunters and Crimson Dawn or Crimson Reign now and all this other stuff. I mean, to be quite honest, you're going to be a little lost as time goes on if you don't actually read these, because right now they're just taking very key points and they're enriching everything. But they're enriching things that it's like, okay, this is stuff that if you're really into this stuff, you really need to know this. The casual fan's not going to do any of it, but you're missing out because they're really filling in a lot of stuff. And I have a feeling these upcoming animated series, Bad Batch Season 2, some of the upcoming TV shows, without question, are going to start referencing this stuff. In fact, they already have. They're already alluding to the fact that Crimson Dawn is coming back in some form or another. We don't know if that's going to hit in the Book of Boba Fett, which is probably where it belongs. Maybe The Mandalorian, maybe even Ahsoka. We don't know. Let's see, we got... This might be an unusual question. There's no such thing on this show. But is there a particular comic book writer that you would like to see working on a Star Wars comic? No, simply because I lost track of comic book writers a long time ago. I mean,
yeah.
It's, when I was a kid and I was practically trading, like, I was getting to the point where I almost professionally traded them. But when I was a kid, I was deeply, we're talking like the 70s, early 80s. That's when I was deeply into comics. Like, I knew all the illustrators, I knew the writers, I knew all that stuff. On the Star Wars side of things, I didn't even really start getting the comics until probably like the Darth Vader ones. I think it was like around 2018 or 19 or something. And then I went back and got the 2015 through 17 issues. Because at the end of any run, they generally release them all in like a single volume. Well, they might have like volume 1, 2, 3, but it's basically like the entire run broken up into various volumes. Because for a long time, I didn't really want to buy comics anymore. And I just had a thing about the digital versions of them. Now I love it. And so now, once I started getting into it, it basically opened up that world to me. And like I said, the other issue, no pun intended, is the fact that it basically is really, it's not how the Star Wars comics used to be. I mean, they're really dealing with expanding the canon in these things. I mean, it's almost like how some of the books are, where you're going to be a little bit lost. Because what they're doing, which is also wise from a business move too, is it's kind of like, okay, we'll keep the films and we'll keep the Disney Plus shows to the point to where you're not going to be completely lost if you come in on them. However, that said, they're now making the books and the comics be a lot more vital to the storyline than what they used to be. You know, it used to just be, you know, if you just wanted to know the continuing adventures of a character or something, or maybe a backstory or whatever. But that's not happening anymore. I mean, this is like crossover type stuff. I mean, there's significant events that are happening in these books that are then being referenced. And again, I don't think it's going to ruin it for the casual fan. I don't know if the casual fan will pick up on it or not, but I'm almost wondering if maybe they're not just finally going, you know what? Screw the casual fan. I mean, the people that really built this empire, again, no pun intended, are the ones that, you know, have been in on it since pretty much the beginning. And, you know, let's honor them a little bit. Let's give them a little bit more. And really all it's doing is just enhancing the entire franchise.
Oh yeah, definitely. I got a question that just came in. They want to know is
where?
Krrsantan
What, somebody
one of my
text
friends
you
that-
or something?
Yeah, actually, yes. But it's a good question though. It's like, is Krrsantan?
Well, are they watching our show, or did they just text you out of the blue because they knew you were?
Well, I sent them the link to it, so maybe they saw the title and they had a question about it, or
Oh, I see.
they,
I
they
was
could,
going to
could
say
be watching it right now.
they need to be chatting.
Well, yeah, that's the idea, but you know,
Yeah, we'll take them however we get them, I guess.
yeah, they want to know: is Krrsantan like a disgraced Wookiee, or is he actually still well regarded within the clan?
In what clan?
Well, the Wookiee clans, or the Wookiee population, I should say.
I mean, I don't really. It's not like that anymore, you know? I mean, that's what, I mean, really kills me about these kind of questions, too, is the fact that it's sort of like, and really, Star Wars is guilty for perpetuating this a little bit, I think. But a lot of times, you know, that would almost be like them saying, well, you know, is Eric still regarded really well among Earth? Or, you know what I mean? It's like, okay, there's like 7 billion people on this planet. Like, maybe 1/1000th know who I am, if even that, right? I mean, and you could look at it from the standpoint of Krrsantan being a champion. He was a gladiator, you know, that he was probably well regarded and he was probably a celebrity. Truthfully, I don't remember if they actually, because he used to be a fighter, he used to be a celebrity, and then when that dried up, and when he was disgraced, which he was, so I mean, from that standpoint, I guess you could say, yeah, he was, he turned into a bounty hunter. And just knowing what I know about Wookiees and basically their honor system and stuff like that, I don't think bounty hunting is really favored upon, but then again, Chewbacca's smuggling, so, and but then again, you know, he didn't become like, you can almost say he was disgraced too, right? Because he basically went from being this regarded guy in you know, the military or whatever, and then he became a smuggler. Well,
But
kind
he
of.
still become a hero though.
He did
He became
eventually, yes. But he didn't get his
Yeah.
medal.
That's right.
But the
Well,
thing
not
is,
at first.
well, right. But the thing is that I don't think it was necessarily that he was disgraced. It was really more like the Wookiees were enslaved by the Empire. He then was also imprisoned. And then when Han saved him, and he basically pledged that life debt to him, it's not so much that, you know, it's really a victim of circumstance. I mean, Han's a smuggler, so Chewie kind of has to, you know, go along with the program, really.
Toe the line, basically.
Yeah, let me get to some of these chats. They're all Ronaldo, of course. He says, for me, I wanted Jeff Johns. Yeah, that name is familiar. I loved his work since I read his Green Lantern run. Everything he touches is gold. Comic book writers.
Writers.
Yeah. Yep. And he said, I bet Kathleen Kennedy texted you. I wish. Kathleen Kennedy texted me. She'd be on this show. Although
that's right.
She probably wouldn't like it very much. But,
right.
Yeah. Well,
10 reasons why we hate Kathleen Kennedy.
Yeah, right. Top 5 reasons. That's great. Then he says,
Friday night.
I think he was thrown out of Keshe because he has no honor.
All right, Worf.
You have no honor. And again, we make a Star Trek reference on the Star Wars show. And then finally, he says, Obi-Wan talked a bit about it in the comics when they first met. Yeah, and it also depends on when in the comics all this stuff happened, too. Because, again, it also depends on a lot of what series they're doing, too, because the weird thing is that even though Disney said, all right, everything that we do from now on is going to be canonized, it still seems to be a little bit selective. There's still things where they'll start out with a series and then later on they'll come up with something else that more or less negates it. Or at the very least is a conflict. And you have to sit there and think to yourself, well, okay, well, which one do we believe, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And the problem is, I think that's one of the reasons why Pablo Hidalgo has become somewhat irritable as of late and attacking fans and everything. And it's like, look, man, you know, I mean, if I were just going to confront him and be like, dude, this is like your job. You know, I mean, this isn't some hobby or whatever, or, you know, I mean, you're sitting there like talking about how pathetic these Star Wars fans are for getting into this. It's like, well, that's basically what you do for a living. You know, it's how pathetic is that? I mean, I guess you could spin that around and say, well, hey, at least I'm getting paid for this. But at the same time, I would still say, okay, man, you're getting paid to do this. So
earn your keep.
You kind of need to like it. And, you know, because look, there's other of us would do it. I mean, look, you pay me to focus on Star Wars 100% and come up with the story stuff. I'm going to do it. You know, it's like, I mean, I'm already doing the show.
Talk about a dream job.
Exactly. I mean, look, it's not like, you know, we're making a fortune off of this YouTube channel or anything. We're basically doing it out of love and out of just a means to build a community and hang out with fellow Star Wars fans to talk Star Wars. We're doing this in addition to everything we do. Can you imagine if, and it's not just the fact that he gets to do Star Wars all day, but and that he gets paid to do it, but he is actually affecting the future of the franchise. I mean, that's an insanely crazy thing. And I think that maybe sometimes the stresses get to you because, and I can't say that I wouldn't, you know, I talk like this now, but, you know, maybe after a couple of years of it, I'd just be like, guys, it's just a movie. I mean, please, you know.
Yeah, it's hilarious that you mentioned. I just watched a very hilarious episode of Big Bang Theory, and they were actually going to the premiere of the new Star Wars movie. And Will Wheaton actually showed up in his Star Trek uniform dressed as Spock, and everybody started booing him. And then he was just like, yeah, I just like to come in and do this stuff because like these Star Wars fans act as though like, oh, if this movie is bad, it affects their lives. And it doesn't. You know, it was just his whole take on Star Wars fans were just like hilarious. But yeah, I mean, you know, Pablo, I mean, yeah, like you said, you know, it's kind of your job, dude. I mean, you know, people are going to definitely ask those questions, and you know, I mean, that's what you got to do. But I think a lot of people look at Krrsantan as a bad guy, and I think that's another thing. So, you know, once again, bounty hunters kind of have this bad rep, you know, as being the bad guys because they looked at Boba Fett the same way because he's doing stuff for Vader and Jabba. So those are bad guys. You're guilty by association, really. But then when you look at, you know, Mando, I mean, he's doing the same thing. but he just seems more noble and more clean as opposed to Krrsantan and Boba Fett. And I think that's why a lot of people are asking, like, okay, well, is Krrsantan like a bad guy, or is he disgraced, or that type of thing? And plus, because he looks so menacing. I mean, like looking at this picture right here. I mean, just looking at him, and you don't even want to say anything to him.
Well, and
Chewie is
again,
always
though,
kind of come off as that kind of fun-loving,
right,
kind of
and more
almost like
cuddly.
a pet.
Yeah.
Yeah, cuddly, almost like a pet type, like a big, you know, uh, German Shepherd or something like that. That's just like really friendly. But Tarfal, I mean not Tarfal, but
Yes,
Krrsantan,
I call him Tarfal. That's awesome.
Krrsantan, man, he just looks like this pit bull, man. Like you just do not want to just even remotely upset him because it's over with.
Well, a couple of things though on that. Number one, that's one of the reasons why I think this new comic series is brilliant for covering when Han worked for Jabba. I
Hmm.
mean, at this point, you could say that Han would be a bad guy, but of course, nobody would say that because they know his personality a little bit more. And of course, all's well that ends well. He becomes one of the heroes of the rebellion. And then, depending on what
Hmm.
source material you're looking at, he's one of the head people in a sense. So that's actually one of the brilliant things I think that J.J. Abrams did was, even though I really liked the whole expanded universe stuff to where, he was by Leia's side and, he was running more military, kind of stayed a general in a sense.
Hmm.
But even then, I think he ended up kind of officially backing out of the actual New Republic military, and he was more independent contractor, but he was still essentially doing the same thing, going off on missions. Whereas
All right.
in The Force Awakens, I thought it was probably a more realistic thing, and it definitely was reinforced in the Last Shot novel, where it's like, there's a lot of pressure, I mean, everybody forgets that he was a smuggler up through episode 4, I mean, he basically was doing a job. And at the
Hmm.
last minute, he had gotten his reward and he took off. And at the last minute, he had a little bit of a tug at the old conscience and he came back and he saved the day. Well, then it was kind of like everybody thought, oh, well, then from Empire on, he was Captain Solo, right? Which they gave him a rank and stuff like that, but he was still kind of like, okay, I am into this cause now. I mean, I want to fight for it,
Hmm.
but you got to let me go and pay Jabba off so I get this price off of my head. That's where we pick up things in episode
Hmm.
5. And
Yep.
everybody forgets that his life as a smuggler actually pretty much up until the
Still
second
going.
yeah, up until the second half of Return of the Jedi, because of course, when he wasn't able to pay Jabba, you would think that it's like, okay, you're a captain in this thing. I would just send, if I didn't have time to do it, I would have just sent somebody. Like, look, somebody's got to go take this money to Jabba and say, hey, it's from Han,
Yeah.
I mean, because this is kind of a thing. And as we see at the end of Empire, basically caught up with him. And so what I
Mhm.
love about this comic series is it's sort of reflective of that. Because, like I was saying, the direction that J.J. Abrams took was probably more realistic. The pressures of being part of this new republic, this new government and all this stuff, it was foreign to him. And, now he has a kid and he's got a wife, and it kind of freaked him out, and he just bailed and went back to what he knew, smuggling.
Mhm.
And so this is basically showing us almost the prequelized version of this. This is what happened before he met up with those guys.
Right.
And yeah, I think that it's really cool that they're showing that side of it, because like you said, I think people think of Krrsantan as a bad guy simply because he's a bounty hunter. When
Mhm.
first Mando,
He
and
just
now
looks
even
more
Boba Fett.
menacing too.
Well, that too, yeah, it's kind of like the way he looks. And a lot of these guys, all the bounty
Mhm.
hunters really look menacing.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I wouldn't want to walk up on one, but I think Tarfal with the low sloping, brows and everything like that, and the kind of like almost like the cold dead eyes he has. it's kind of like, okay, dude, where Chewie is kind of a little bit more jovial a little bit. And I think that's just because, he's been around a lot of humans, mainly Han cracking jokes and stuff. And we've even heard like Chewie laugh, a couple of times, you know, so you see that personality in Chewie. Like you said, Eric, he's more like fun loving, cuddly, and that kind of, he carries that vibe with him where you just like, oh, it's Chewie. And he even has a cute little name, Chewie. You know what I mean? Like, you just love him. But Krrsantan, man, he looks like a gladiator. He looks like he's about the business, and he doesn't. And then of course, like you said earlier, when you start taking all that blaster fire, man, I'm impressed, honestly, but that's why I think this is such an interesting matchup between the two of them, because, when you look at them, it's like, okay, Krrsantan looks big, but, that doesn't always mean that you're, the strongest either. And like I said, Chewie can kind of get pretty upset, pretty ticked off as well. So,
well, it's kind of like I went back, what we said at the beginning of the show, right? Where, a lot of people would say that, but I'd go, okay, then that would mean that Arnold Schwarzenegger should be able to beat up Bruce Lee. It's not happening.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So, you can't necessarily go by that. Ronaldo's got a couple of good things here. He basically says, I always thought Han being a general was weird. It was weird, but I thought it was cool, though. That was one of the things that I thought was kind of, even though it was sort of like you could see how desperate they were, because like Lando joins up for 10 minutes and now he's suddenly a general. It's like you're just bypassing, like surely these other guys that have been in it the whole time, like since the time of Rogue One, let's say, we're probably like, okay, cool, I'm a captain, I'm going up to, and all of a sudden,
sergeant, lieutenant, and
right,
now these guys
going up through the ranks,
general.
and then all of a sudden you get the smuggler guy who basically comes in, and now at least he was a captain first. So with Solo, it's a little bit different because I think he earned the respect of everybody. And so when he was made a general, I think everybody was on board with that. But I did think it was funny, though. Calrissian basically comes in, and he's there for like 5 minutes, and all of a sudden he comes in as a general. But, it's probably because his experience maybe was comparable. I don't know. Let's see what else we got. And then, of course, this is where Ronaldo starts talking about Krrsantan, because a lot of these things are true. He says, well, to be fair, in the comics, Krrsantan is a killer. He's like, bounty hunter, yes, but he has no problems killing people.
True.
And that, that's all very true. And then he says, my brother asked me once, what's stronger, a Wookiee or a Klingon? Oh, man, now we're really getting the whole... now we're doing
talking.
We're not doing just crossover. We're talking like crossover. Head to head, a Star Trek podcast.
For the record, I'm gonna go Wookiee.
Oh yeah, hands down. I mean, absolutely. I mean, there just isn't any doubt. I mean, I'm sure. It's interesting because, and I'm not really saying that as because I am a fan of both. I mean, yeah, I always give the edge to Star Wars. I'm probably more of a Star Wars fan than a Star Trek fan. But, I was pretty much a hardcore Star Trek fan too, man. I was reading all the novels and, getting into it like throughout all the 90s. Yeah, I was like consumed with it. So I would basically read a Star Wars novel, and then I would put that down and read a Star Trek one. And the coolest one, just still the most bizarre one, is that weird crossover with the X-Men and Star Trek The Next Generation cast. Which, of course, as you pointed out, which I didn't even think about, was it's kind of like, well, wait a minute. He meets Professor X. It's kind of like he's meeting himself. Depending on what he's doing.
Who's depicting him.
Yeah, right? So Ronaldo says, I said Wookiee, love Klingons, but Wookiees are way, way stronger. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely Wookiees.
I don't really know of anybody that would... It would be, let's put it this way, it would be interesting to hear the counter argument to that.
It would.
I could...
Definitely would.
I could see I mean, I'm not going to sit there and say that it's like no contest or whatever. I mean, I don't think so. But at the same time, I could see where you might be able to make at least a compelling argument the other way. It would be wrong, but
Interesting nonetheless.
yeah, but I mean, just for laughs, for ha-has, as it were. But yeah, I mean, so it's going to be really interesting to see what they do in this whole matchup when it comes to issue number 4. Now, again,
which comes out in June, by the way. So
which comes
don't try
out
to
in
rush
June.
out.
Yeah. Don't try to rush out. Although I would suggest you rush out and buy issue 1 of this comic, though, and at least check it out, because I really think that everybody would enjoy it. But again, yeah, don't go rushing out trying to buy this issue, because it's not coming out until June. But I think definitely when it does come out, we'll revisit this. I don't know if we'll do an entire show on it, but we'll definitely mention it somewhere, when it comes out, and really give the thing. But yeah, I mean, so, final thoughts. You're gonna say Chewbacca still, I'm sure, right? Nothing's actually swayed you.
Yeah, I'm gonna still rock with Chewbacca. I think he's got the upper hand all the way around, just being a little bit more cunning and a little having that that Army Ranger background, and I just think that I think he's kind of like that quiet storm. He's generally pretty cool, but I think when you get him really, really riled up, I think he probably really just will surprise a lot of us. So,
well, and we saw glimpses of that too. In A New Hope, he went in and just took out all those. Now, I know what people usually think of stormtroopers, but but in The Force Awakens, though,
he's picking those guys.
He was picking those guys off, and then of course, even in Solo, he was pretty much devastating those guys too. And then a lot of the, and then in Empire Strikes Back, when he kind of breaks loose, and when Han's being lowered in, and he kind of freaks out, and Vader more or less stops him from being killed. But we do see elements, and then of course, don't forget Unkar Platt. He did rip his arms off in the deleted scenes.
Yeah, right.
So there's definitely some examples of Chewbacca showing, and then of course, even Jabba tips the hat to him. Now here's another line, something that we didn't even think about. But
at last we have the mighty
Chewbacca. It's kind of like, now he knows who Krrsantan is. I mean, granted, at the time it was written, he wasn't created, but work with me.
Right.
The point is that Jabba had Krrsantan in his employ for a while, right? But he's all like, ooh, the mighty Chewbacca. So Chewbacca's reputation must be that.
It definitely precedes him.
Yeah. So, I don't think that, I mean, even for people that might not budge on this one and still, for some weird reason, want to say that Krrsantan is probably stronger, which again, you can make the argument. I could see that. But you have to at least understand that it would be very, very difficult. And again, it was kind of like we said at the beginning of the show. It really just depends on the circumstances.
Definitely.
Now, I think the circumstances in this issue number 4 are also going to give the edge to Chewbacca, simply because Han's going to be in some sort of trouble, and Krrsantan is standing in the way for some reason. So we'll have to see how that shakes out. And I'm really curious on how Krrsantan views Han Solo at this point as well.
Or even Chewie, for that matter.
Exactly. You got to figure, because Han by this point is notorious. And in fact, Jabba had given, because he wanted some statue or something. Like the whole plot of issue number 1 anyway is he needs some statue. It's on Corellia. So he sends Han and Chewbacca out to get it for him. And he's offering them like 500,000 credits or something. But then he offers 1,000,000 credits to some other bounty hunter, and they're like, oh, well, who else is on this thing? And he's like, oh, Han Solo is. And they're like, ooh, I mean, it's kind of like, you could tell that it's, there's some sort of like, oh, okay, it's Han. So Han has his reputation by that point, and I'm sure so does Chewie. And in fact, I would even go further to say that part of the reason why Han is so respected and feared is because Chewie's by his side.
Mm-hmm.
So, they know that Han's not going to be an easy target. So it's going to be a really, really interesting comic, I think, when it is finally released. But
absolutely,
you and I are both going Chewbacca. Ronaldo, I think, is still sticking with Black Krrsantan. But we definitely want to know from you guys in the comments section, who do you think is stronger between these two? Now, again, don't get too hung up on the wording here. It's not just about sheer strength. It's, who's a better fighter, who can, just overall, who's, I guess, the best, right? And so, with that, we don't really know. I always say this. We don't know what we're talking about Friday yet, do we?
Not yet.
Not yet. So you know what that means? It means you guys are going to have to keep an eye on the channel. You know the best way to keep an eye on the channel? Subscribe to the channel. Subscribe to the channel. Hit that like button. See, it's definitely time to go. My blue light went out. Subscribe to the channel. Milk. That's right. Hit the like button. Hit every button except dislike. Don't like dislike. And leave a comment. Let us know who you think is stronger, Black Krrsantan or Chewbacca. And we'll be talking some more Star Wars Friday night at 8. Remember, we're on every Monday, every Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern. And just here talking Star Wars with you guys. All right, so with that, I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.